Welcome to The Explainer. Okay, so what if I told you that a story that was lost for over 2,000 years, actually holds the key to fighting the giant problems we face today? We're about to dive into an ancient text that gives us a powerful framework for taking on systemic injustice. And trust me, it's more relevant now than you could possibly imagine.
So, let's ask the big question. How do you fight an enemy who is a giant? I'm not talking about some mythical monster. I'm talking about a system, something so vast, so powerful, it just feels completely unstoppable. You know, a force that just chews up resources, communities, and even our hope. When you're up against something like that, where do you even start?
Well, the answer, and this is the crazy part, might just be in a story that was buried for millennia. Seriously, it's this forgotten tale that doesn't just give us a way to talk about the giants of our time. It actually gives us a clear method for confronting them head on.
All right, to really get how this ancient story can help us, we've got to get specific about the giants we face today. First things first, we have to name them.
Now, to be clear, these giants aren't literal monsters with clubs and all that. They're metaphors, right? Metaphors for the very real systems of power that are out there consuming and exploiting our world. We're talking about huge economic structures, deep historical injustices, and even social norms that cause real violence to people and the planet.
And this is where the metaphor stops being a metaphor and gets real. Let's look at this analysis from South Africa. It shows these giants aren't just abstract ideas, they have tangible, violent consequences. For example, the extractive industry. It's not just a business, right? It becomes this giant that poisons water and displaces entire communities. Or the colonial legacy. That's not just something in a history book. It's a giant that is still creating poverty and inequality today. And patriarchy. It's a giant that makes gender-based violence seem normal. You see the pattern here? They all have this insatiable, destructive appetite. They just consume.
But this whole idea of giants, it's not new at all. In fact, it's ancient. Our story actually starts in the desert, with what is, hands down, one of the most incredible archaeological finds of the 20th century. It's called the Book of Giants. It's a 2,200-year-old text found in little tiny fragments among the Dead Sea Scrolls. What it does is it takes this mysterious little passage in the book of Genesis and blows it up into this epic story about powerful giants, born from celestial beings whose nonstop violence and consumption just corrupts the entire world. So in the story, these giants are just on a rampage. They have this endless appetite, and they're devouring everything. But then something shifts. Their power starts to crack. They're hit with these terrible nightmares, prophetic dreams about their own destruction. So totally desperate, they go looking for a human scribe, a guy named Enoch, to figure out what it all means. But Enoch, well, he doesn't give them good news. He basically pronounces their judgment. A massive flood is coming to wipe the slate clean, to cleanse the earth that they've corrupted.
Okay, and this is the moment. This is where this ancient, fragmented story becomes an incredibly powerful tool for right now. Because the parallels between the giants back then and the systems we see today, they're honestly startling.
I mean, just look at this. The connection is absolutely undeniable. The ancient giants, they devoured the Earth's resources. Our modern giants, they extract minerals and leave behind collapsed ecosystems. The ancient giants shed blood and committed violence. Our systems today fuel conflict and keep people locked in poverty. They were corrupted by greed. We're driving climate change through endless consumption. And maybe the biggest one of all, the ancient giants were terrified by warnings of their own doom, but they couldn't understand them. Just like our modern giants dismiss climate science and ignore indigenous knowledge, the pattern is exactly the same.
You know, the source material for this says it perfectly. The giants have never really left us. Their playbook, that insatiable hunger, it's all still here. It just wears a different mask.
So the big question is, how do we turn this incredible old story into actual modern-day action? Well, the source offers a really powerful but also really simple 3-step method for communities to talk about this and make a plan.
It's called the See, Judge, Act framework. It comes out of a practice called contextual Bible study, and it's basically a guide for facilitators, especially for folks working with youth groups or communities on the front lines of social justice. The process is super straightforward. First, you see what's happening in the ancient story and what's happening right here in our community. Then you judge. What does this story mean for our specific struggle for justice? And finally, you act. Based on all that, what is this story calling us to do, together?
So for step 1, see, a facilitator could get the group thinking about that moment when Enoch confronts the giants. And then you ask a question like this one.
The point here isn't to get into some heavy theological debate. It's about connecting with the human feeling of the story, tapping into what it feels like to be afraid, but also to be courageous.
Okay, next up, step 2, judge. This is where the conversation jumps from the ancient world right into our world, today. This is the key moment. You ask the group to start naming their giants. Who are they? Is it a corporation polluting the local river, a government policy that's pushing people out of their homes? Is it a culture of violence? Suddenly, this old story becomes a mirror, reflecting their own reality. And finally, we get to step 3, act. This is where talk turns into commitment. A question like this one helps the group focus on something specific, something they can actually do. Look, it's not about trying to slay every giant at once. It's about taking that critical first step, just like Enoch did, naming one single injustice out loud together.
And that's why this framework is so powerful. The story doesn't just give us a name for the problem. It also gives us a role model for the solution. It's like a template for what it actually looks like to stand up to these giants.
I mean, just think about that power flip for a second. These huge, violent, all-powerful giants, they come to Enoch, who's just a scribe, a writer. Why? Because he holds the truth. He has the knowledge they don't. He can read the warning signs that they are blind to. He's what you might call an organic intellectual, an expert who uses their knowledge to serve the people, not the powerful.
So, what does it mean to be an Enoch today? It means being that person who speaks the truth even when it's dangerous. It's the community researcher, the protest artist, the activist, the elder. Really, it's anyone who uses what they know to serve the marginalized. It means being the one who interprets the warnings that the powerful ignore, whether that's climate data or the cries of the land itself. It's about naming the evil and, maybe most importantly, announcing that a better world or renewal is actually possible.
And this brings us to what might be the single most powerful idea here. The source material says the Book of Giants has not been suppressed. It has been waiting. Just waiting. Waiting for a time just like ours, a time when its message is so desperately needed and when people, when communities, are finally ready to hear its call to action.
So, when you boil it all down, this ancient story isn't just a story. It's a tool. It's a practical guide for communities to see the giants around them, to judge the harm they're doing, and to act. It's a tool for resistance, for healing, and for finding a real, deep, and resilient kind of hope.
You know, in the story, Enoch wrote down the giant's fate on stone tablets. It was his act of telling the truth, of passing judgment. And now, that story, that framework, that inspiration, it's all been handed down to us. The tablets can now be read. So the only real question left is, what will yours say?